I'm Leslie Maddox, an engineer turned homeschool mom, and I want to help you customize your homeschool. One way we can customize our homeschools is by educating our children using their learning preferences. But what do I mean by learning preferences? First, let me tell you what I don't mean. I don't mean learning styles. That's not what I'm referring to at all. You may have learned or heard about learning styles like visual or kinesthetic. The idea is that each person is wired to learn best in a specific way, and that style of learning is consistent no matter what is being learned. Using the idea of learning styles, you would figure out if your student learns best from, for example, listening to a lecture or reading a book. If the idea of learning styles is true, learning is as simple as figuring out your student's learning style and gearing all learning activities to that particular learning style. There's a lot of focus put on learning styles in the homeschool community, especially when it comes to making curriculum choices. But are learning styles really a thing? Are each of our brains wired to work in one particular way? And are we really that basic? After doing some research and evaluating my own experiences with learning and what I see in my children, my answer to this question is no. For one thing, if you research learning styles, you'll come across lists with different numbers of learning styles. There's not one master list of learning styles. It varies depending on where you look. Also, in my experience, learning styles may change depending on age or ability. For example, a 5-year-old that loves hands-on activities may become a 10-year-old that prefers reading. A learning style may also not be accurate or complete. I tried so hard to find a learning style that fit my oldest son, but none seemed to be quite right. There was no perfect fit, and it seemed to change depending on the situation. Which brings me to my biggest gripe with learning styles. Assigning a learning style to a student creates a label that, instead of opening us up to possibilities, puts some blinders on us. We might discount learning activities, methods, or opportunities that could be great for our students simply because they don't fit that supposed learning style. For me, the bottom line was that the idea of learning styles absolutely did not help me in my homeschool or in educating my children. If anything, it created more confusion than clarity. It turns out that I'm not the only person that questions the idea of learning styles. I recently came across a video that talks about the myth of learning styles. I'll link it below for the curious. The video describes studies that were done to evaluate the credibility of the idea of learning styles, and the conclusion was that there is no support for the learning styles theory. The narrator explicitly states that what is more important than how information is presented is what is going on inside the learner's head. Sure, there are situations where a particular person is wired to be better at a specific skill than the average person. Some people have amazing memories without using memory techniques. Others have perfect pitch. I have a son that seems to absorb language. I barely had to teach him to read. And I have another son that has a natural aptitude for sports. There seems to be some wiring there that gives these natural abilities. When it comes to learning, it's both much more complicated and much simpler than a person's wiring. It's more complicated because a number of factors can be involved in how well a child learns a particular topic on a specific day. Is the child tired, distracted, excited? Is the information similar to previously learned information? Is learning the topic more fun because of the teaching method or resource used? Does the child have the maturity and character required to focus and persevere through the learning process? And the reason for learning can be as simple as the topic is of particular interest to the student, or something about the learning process grabs their attention. Maybe there's a test coming up that serves as a motivator, or the kid just wants to look smart to impress someone. I think that the video I mentioned before about the myth of learning styles is a good example. The gentleman in the video performs an admittedly unscientific experiment to demonstrate his premise that learning styles are a myth by having participants memorize a list of words on camera. In my opinion, simply the fact that the participants are on camera and don't want to look foolish is reason enough to cause them to focus and do the best that they can. This confirms my own theory, which is that learning what grabs a particular student's attention is much more helpful as a homeschool teacher. And what grabs a student's attention can change from subject to subject and from year to year. I call these learning preferences. The two different aspects of learning preferences, as I've defined them, are learning methods and social needs. Learning methods are different ways to take in information or activities to do while learning. These are not the same as learning styles because learning styles are supposedly hardwired in a student and consistent no matter what is being learned. With learning methods, the focus instead is on ways to take in information or activities to do while learning that grabs the student's attention and keeps it. And these can change over time or depending on what the student is currently learning. Learning methods are not static. Maybe some examples will make this more clear. I have a student that finds spelling challenging. While some kids naturally pick up spelling from doing a lot of reading, language in any form does not capture this particular child's attention. But like most kids, he loves computer games. So I found an app that allows me to input a spelling list, which is then used for games. Those games capture and keep his attention long enough to learn his spelling list through repetition. I have another child that actually loves flashcards. He's on the autism spectrum and thrives on consistency and routine. Flashcards that he can look at over and over again by himself work with his rigid thinking and capture his attention, at least for right now. As for me, my attention drifts off during lectures and I have a hard time hanging on to spoken words. But I love to read. I even love the look of written text. Written words that I can look at over and over again give me something to focus on and to keep my attention. I'm also frequently overwhelmed by sensory input, but reading helps me to block out the noise and distraction. So my brain isn't wired to learn best through reading. It's more that I've learned to use reading to block out overwhelm, which has caused me to find comfort in reading a book and consequently facilitates my learning. When I'm too distracted or tired to read, I can learn from YouTube videos or lectures on topics that are especially interesting to me. Sometimes it's just easier than sifting through a lot of written words, as much as I love them. So hopefully those examples help you understand that we all have differences for a variety of reasons in how we learn. Knowing what learning methods capture your kids' attention will go a long way toward helping you choose curricula. My recommendation is to use a student's learning preferences, both learning methods and social needs, with challenging subjects or with subjects that are especially boring to your student. For everything else, don't go all out, just get it done and move on. Consistency and stepwise learning using quality curriculum does a lot of the work for you. The Homeschool Plan and Decoded Starter Kit contains a worksheet to help you flesh out your students' preferences, their preferred learning methods, and social needs. So look for the learning methods and activities that capture your students' attention. You'll find 5 learning method categories: written word, spoken word, visual, interactive, and physical. Written word is broken up into 2 subcategories, reading and writing. A student whose attention is grabbed by a book, like myself, may tune out doing copy work or be distracted by note-taking. On the other hand, a student that gets a lot out of writing a report may avoid doing a lot of reading. Spoken word is also broken up into 2 subcategories, listening and speaking. One student may learn well by listening to audiobooks or read aloud because they can do other activities while listening, while another student may be, shall we say, a bit of a performer and get a lot out of preparing an oral report or doing narration. Visual students may love video, graphic organizers, maps, and charts, or maybe it's color or pictures that grab their attention. Interactive students may have more fun with dry subjects via notebooking, arts and crafts, and games, or maybe just organizing information helps them to process it better. A student that prefers the physical learning method may have attention captured through sensory experiences like cooking, or they may need to stand or be active to focus their attention. Please keep in mind that this isn't a science. But I found that this way of thinking about learning is helpful, especially with challenges in our homeschool and in narrowing down curriculum choices. So take some time to think about and observe each of your students and make a note of a couple of learning methods that seem to work especially well for them and of a learning method to maybe avoid. And put that information in your back pocket for when your students are struggling. Besides learning methods, the other aspect of learning is social needs. I found that this area has had a huge impact in our homeschool. Question to ask yourself here is, what environment is most conducive to my students' learning? The options are group, one-on-one, and independent. Students that do well with independent learning prefer to work on their own and have the reading skills to do that. They may prefer to immerse themselves in their learning without the distraction of someone else's voice or conversation. A student that prefers one-on-one teaching may not have the reading skills to work on their own. They might also love that one-on-one attention from a parent or tend to ask a lot of questions. Students that do well with group learning are not distracted by noise and activity. They enjoy group projects and work well with others. Homeschoolers are often encouraged to incorporate group learning into their homeschools in order to simplify and save time, but it doesn't work for everyone. In my family, I have a student that completely checks out in a group setting and another student that gets competitive with the other members of the group. Rather than being a magical homeschool experience, group learning for us is just a nightmare, so I've given up on it. Something interesting to note is that introversion and extroversion don't seem to have much to do with whether a student prefers group, one-on-one, or independent learning. My most introverted student 100% prefers one-on-one learning rather than independent, and my extremely extroverted students don't do well with group learning. So don't make assumptions based on personality about your kids' social needs when it comes to learning. After determining your students' learning preferences, you should also determine your own learning preferences so that you can guard against mother bias. It's easy to fall into the thinking that our kids are just like us. It's even easier to assume that some preferences are universal. For example, just because you love reading, it doesn't mean that all of your kids will love reading too. And that's okay, because each of your kids is a unique being, separate and different from you. They're not your clones, and we need to respect our kids for who they are, not who we want them to be. And there's no universally loved or effective activity. Not everyone loves games or puzzles. Educational songs don't work for everyone. This world is full of too much variety to find any one way of learning that works for everyone all the time. So determine your students' learning preferences yearly before beginning curriculum research, and you'll avoid some problems. In the next Homeschool Planning Decoded video, we'll talk about a related topic: difficulties, dislikes, and delights. You can access all of the videos that walk you through the steps of the Homeschool Planning Decoded method of planning and organizing your homeschool at the link below right now. And happy planning!